Back again, my lovely student, with the last part of our curriculum of this quarter. Continue lesson 6 of chapter 6, which talk about what is the water cycle. Part 2, we will explore together the relationship between water cycle and weather, and the relationship between water cycle and climate. In the beginning, I'd like you to see this picture, which represent, like we said previously in the previous lesson, it represents the process of evaporation in ocean, sun, clouds, rain and snow, trees, river, and finally underground water. We will explore together what the relationship between water cycle and how water cycle affects weather and climate. Let's get started with warming up slides of the previous lesson. The forms of water are solid, liquid, gas. The solid water is represented as ice, sleet, snow. Liquid water is in the form of rain, fog, mist. Gas is water vapor, like we said. Turning to another slide here, it's about the water cycle process. The water cycle is consisted of 4 processes, which is the first one is evaporation. Evaporation takes place when the sun warms the water of the ocean or any body of water. Then the vapor will go upward to a next process, which is condensation. In condensation, the water vapor will meet together and form clouds. When the clouds is very heavy and the droplet of water become heavy, it can precipitate it in the form of snow, sleet, hail to the ground. After that, the storage process will take place. So, starting with evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and finally storage. Turning to another slide here to warm you up. Here is the form of evaporation and how the evaporation take place when the sun energy or heat warms the ocean surface. The water vapor will rising up. If you heat any amount of water inside the tea thermos, the vapor will go out in the air, so it represents evaporation as well. Turning to another process here is condensation. You know that condensation or clouds form when the water vapor in the atmosphere cools and condenses. So, when the water vapor in atmosphere cools, it gives us the condensation process. Another point here from the previous lesson is precipitation. Precipitation is the third process in the water cycle. In precipitation, the water that falls in the earth in any form, which are rain, snow, sleet, or hail. Do you remember? Yes, you do. Turning to the last process here, which is storage. When the precipitation take place and the rain get down into the ground, people can store the water from the rain inside tanks under the ground or above the ground, as you see here in the figure.
Water covers more than 3/4 of Earth's surface. Earth's water is always being recycled. The movement of Earth's water from Earth's surface to its atmosphere and back again is called the water cycle. Any form of water that falls to Earth is called precipitation. You may know precipitation as rain, snow, or hail. Precipitation may sink into the soil and become groundwater. Groundwater may seep from the ground into lakes, rivers, or the ocean. The sun's warmth causes water to evaporate. Condensation turns water vapor in the air into liquid droplets in clouds or fog. Precipitation falls from clouds and the cycle starts again. The water cycle is a main factor that causes daily weather conditions. Weather is the day-to-day changes in temperature, winds, precipitation, and other conditions. Climate is the average of weather conditions over a long period of time, usually 30 years. Climate includes average temperatures, average amounts of precipitation, and how much the temperature changes during the year. Just as the water cycle affects daily weather conditions, it also affects climate. For example, places near the ocean often receive a lot of precipitation. This is a weather pattern caused by the evaporation and condensation of the water cycle.
As you listen and watch here in the video, let me ask you a question before we get starting our today's lesson. Let me say, have you ever heard why we say about this city with rainy weather or that with hot dry weather? Or have you ever asked yourself how meteorologists are predicting or forecasting the weather for tomorrow or years to come? In today's lesson, we will explore together what is the answer of these questions and the relationship between water cycle and weather or climate, and how the water cycle affect or make change or make any effect on the weather and the climate of any place. Let's get started with the weather definition. The weather is defined as the result of how water, air, and temperature interact. So we have three parameters here, which represented in water, air, temperature. So when the water from the water cycle interact or make a change to the air under the effect of temperature, so this will be the weather. So here is the strong relationship between water cycle and weather, because the water cycle and how is the water vapor is consisted of according to the amount of vapor in the air under the effect of the sun, which represented in temperature. They interact together to give us the weather. So the weather represents the status of the day, water, air, temperature when they interact together. So water cycle is the main factor that causes daily weather conditions such as clouds and precipitation. You watch the local weather report. Will the weather be cloudy? Will there be rain? The answer of these questions depend partly on the water cycle. Like I said, according to the water cycle, which represented in evaporation, condensation, precipitation, according to the amount of water of the atmosphere, there will be changes in the weather. So the water cycle affects the weather by the amount of water in the atmosphere and how the water turns into another process according to precipitation. So, for example, the temperature of the air in the atmosphere affects the type of precipitation that falls. Like I said, if there dry weather, so there will not be more water in the atmosphere, so that affects the type of precipitation. Water falls as rain when the air in the atmosphere is above freezing. So when the above atmosphere is freezing, so this affect on the kind of vapor that will fall in the form of precipitation. So it will be rainy weather. Number two, if the air near Earth's surface is colder than air higher up, rain may freeze when it falls. Let me give you an example here. Imagine that you drink any hot drink. After you finish this hot drink, you start to drink very cold one. What will you feel? What will you feel if you drink two different drinks? One of them is hot and the other one is cold. You may feel some hurt in your teeth because the change in the temperature of the two drinks. That's it. In example number 2 here, he said the air near Earth's surface is colder and the higher is warmer than. So the rain may freeze when it falls. So when the rain comes from upward to downward in the ground, from high level temperature to low level temperature, it will be freezes. So you may see the snow. Example number 3 here is the sleet. The sleet is a form of rain that has frozen on its way to Earth, depending upon the temperature and the vapor and how the temperature is different from the upper level to the lower level. Snow here may form when the atmosphere is very cold. So when the upper atmosphere is very cold, it affects the precipitation in the form of snow. So snow forms when the water vapor changes directly into ice crystals. You have to know this information because it's very important information of this lesson. I know that this lesson need you to pay me your attention and focus more to understand what's the relationship between water cycle and weather, because I think they are mixed lessons together, which we studied weather and climate separate and water cycle. So in this lesson we will combine the water cycle and weather climate together. The last point here, how is hail is formed. Hail can develop at freezing temperatures. It forms when the drop of water in clouds freeze and coated with layer of ice. So when precipitation is in the form of hail, hail is developed as a result of the drop of water in the clouds upward is freezed and coated with layer of ice, depending upon the temperature of the air. Turning to another slide here of our today's lesson, which some questions about the previous slide and about the water cycle and its relationship with weather. Let's get started with the first question here, which talk about cause and effect. What effect does temperature have on precipitation? Like we said, the temperature of the air affected on the precipitation and the form of the precipitated rain. So the temperature of the air affects the type of precipitation that falls. So it's a strong relationship between temperature and the form of, or the type of precipitated rain. The second question here is apply. You have to apply. What is the weather like today? Explain how the water cycle is related to the weather condition. So the possible answer here may be raining. It's raining today. So when it's raining today, the precipitation step of the water cycle is occurring. The third question is analyze. Which step of the water cycle is happening when a cloud forms? When a cloud forms, do you remember? Yes, of course, condensation. Because condensation is the second process after evaporation. When the water vapor go upward, it will be in the form of clouds. When the water vapor join together, it can give us droplet, water droplet, which is the form of clouds. So condensation, because moist air rises into cooler air and condenses, forming clouds. That's why the clouds is formed. Turning to another point here of our today's lesson, which talk about the water cycle and climate. In the beginning, I'd like to define climate, and climate is defined as the pattern of weather in place over many years. So the difference between climate and weather is very big. So the weather represents the status of the day or the week, short time. Unlike climate, the climate is the pattern of weather. The climate represents the status of the weather for the place over many years. For example, when you go to Jeddah, for example, you know that before you go to Jeddah, that Jeddah have moist weather because of the presence of the sea, which give us more vapor in the air. This vapor will be in the form of moist. So the climate represents the status of the city or the country for many years. Like, for example, another example, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are of the dry and hot weather. We hear about this before we go to these places. That's why we described it by climate. So the climate is defined as the pattern of weather in a place over many years. So some places, like I said, have wet climate, unlike another places which are about dry climate. As the water cycle affects daily weather conditions, because the water cycle affects or make a change or make any effect on daily weather conditions, it also affects the climate, because the climate, like we said in the beginning of this slide, the climate is the weather pattern. So if there any changes happen to the weather pattern, there will be change or accompany change affect the climate as well. For example, like we said, places near sea, ocean receive a lot of precipitation. Why? Because the sun heats or warms the surface water and give us more vapor. This more vapor or much vapor turns to be condensed one. So the precipitation will be huge or have large amount. The sun energy causes a lot of water to evaporate from the ocean. Then the winds carry the water vapor in the air over land. So the land get more rain than places that not near a large body of water. That's why the places near to the sea or the ocean, like Jeddah, like any coastal city, receive a lot of precipitation. So we can describe this city or this place with a wet climate, So the climate here represents the pattern of weather over many years. Turning to the last part here of our today's lesson, especially for water cycle and its relationship with climate, we have two questions here in form of define and determine. So let's get started with the first question, which talk about what is the climate. So we defined the climate previously. The climate is the weather pattern in a place over many years, not in one day or 1 week or 1 month. No, it's the pattern of weather in place over many years. The second question is to determine. How would you describe the climate of your state? It's depending upon your state, which is near from the ocean or from any body of water, or far from any body of water. So how is this climate affected by the water cycle? So there is a strong relationship between the water cycle and the climate and weather. Like we said, the amount of water or vapor of the place will change or will affect the precipitation process. So we can describe the climate or the weather according to the amount of precipitation and water vapor in this place. So going back to our question by the answer, so the possible answer here is the climate is wet. The climate is wet. You can describe your climate of your state by saying wet. As a result of the water cycle, a lot of precipitation falls in the winter as snow and in the summer as rain. So you can describe your state climate here by the terminology of wet. As a result of this water cycle, there will be a lot of precipitation falls in the winter in the form of snow, and in summer in the form of rain. So this will be the end of today's lesson and the end also of our curriculum of this quarter. I hope you understand all lessons. If you have any problem with any part of any lessons, feel free and call me on WhatsApp to keep in contact. I will be glad for your contact and I will explain more and more for you. I hope you enjoy and I hope you success. Take care of yourself. Stay home. Bye bye.